Hey everyone, it's Terry with Terry's Tidbits. Thank you so much for coming to my channel, watching my videos, and going to my blog post and leveraging those resources there. I just love the opportunity to visit with you and to share knowledge with you. Hopefully it helps you. If not, I'm sorry. But it is a lot of fun to be able to plug in and support the community and help people in their process of learning and growing in their Salesforce journey. This particular video is from Midwest Dreamin. That occurred just about 8 days ago. I had the privilege of speaking there. This is a session I called Lightbulb Flow Finally Makes Sense. I hope that you enjoy it. I think you'll learn that just simple techniques, simple concepts you're already familiar with can help you learn some of the new things about flow and concepts that maybe might be a little bit confusing. Hopefully I'm able to help make sense of some of those new terms and just different nuances about flow that I think you'll find valuable. Let's take a look at the video. Hey everyone, it's Terry with Terry's Tidbits. I am so glad you're here. Thank you for coming. There is still a couple seats up front if you would like to sit down. That would be awesome. I do want to recognize first our sponsors. Thank you. If you're a sponsor and you're in the room, can you raise your hand just so we can recognize you real quick? Any sponsors coming to see me? None. All right. So I want you all to go see them. So please go visit the sponsors out there. It's because of them that events like this are possible. So it's really important that you take that time. There's a lot of really good products down there, and so take some time to do that. That would be awesome. If you haven't figured out the Wi-Fi password it's changed slightly. I think there's a dash in it where your badge, I think, doesn't show that. That's on the screen right now there if you need it. I find sometimes that learning new things can be really a little bit frustrating. And especially if I can do what it is I'm trying to do with another tool and accomplish the same thing. Yeah. I will read article after article, blog post after blog post. I'll try this, I'll try that, and it just ends in frustration. And then finally, the light bulb turns on, and like magic, everything starts to make sense. How many of you are Despicable Me fans in the room? Any Despicable Me fans? There's a few of you. All right, I'm sorry for the rest of you that don't like them. Gru is the main character in Despicable Me. And Gru is often faced with challenges. If you've seen the show, you're aware of that. He takes, on his first movie, he goes and steals a shrink ray. And in the process of transporting that shrink ray back to his home, his nemesis, Vector, steals it from him. Vector lives in this very fortified house, and Gru needs a way to get into that home in order to get the shrink ray back. Everybody remember the story? Mm-hmm. He comes up with this scheme of adopting 3 girls. He calls them Gorls. And he uses those girls to sell cookies, some of which are robots, that allow him into that home to steal back the shrink ray. The problem that he has now is he has to have a way of getting rid of those Gorls. Let's take a look.
No.
But we've never been, and it's the funnest place on earth.
Don't care.
Please! Oh, never has for ever. Please. Please. Oh, come on.
Light bulb.
Now, you might be at that point with flow. You know that what you can do in Process Builder and even workflow rules, and it's easy and you can do it there and be perfectly happy doing it. But Salesforce, in its great wisdom, has come to us and said, you really have to start using flow. And so our favorite little tools that we like and love now are going to go away. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Terry Miller. Wow. I'm in God mode, I think, here now. QR code up there at the top of the screen. If you'd like my contact information, you can scan that code. I am a Salesforce MVP, new this year, so excited about that. Very proud, was shocked when I saw the email come through. But I am also somebody who just really loves to teach and mentor people. And that's really what I do, the things that I do. I have done a lot of work with our local community college. It's Des Moines Area Community College. And in the work that I've done with them has been to try to help get Salesforce curriculum created and dispersed into the Des Moines area. Probably like most of you, you have a shortage of Salesforce talent. We're trying to see if we can correct some of that in the Des Moines area. One of the ways that we are partnering together is I lead a handful of certification study groups. QR code on the left of your screen is for a platform app builder certification. If you're one of those people who need the structured training and want to participate in a study group format, you can scan that QR code. I'll be leading that along with a handful of other folks that will participate in that session. So there is that. That's enough about me. I'd like to kind of move on and actually get to our topics. So when I talk to admins, I will often hear things like, flow is hard, it's frustrating, it's intimidating. I open up that big wide open space and I don't know what to do. Terry, I am not a developer, and this feels an awful lot like developer-y things to me. And you might be right on all of those accounts. I hope that by coming to this session, if that is you, I'm hoping that I will be able to turn on a few light bulbs for you to help make flow make sense to you. And that's what we're here to do. I will tell you that we are going to go through this extremely fast. There, I'm in God mode again. You didn't know this when you walked in the room, but you're actually getting 2 sessions for the price of 1 today. So congratulations. Midwest Dreamin, in its great wisdom, said, hey, I like both sessions that you submitted. Can you combine them into one? So we're going to move extremely fast through this, and you're going to get both 2 sessions here for the price of 1. The first one is from Process Builder to Lightning Flow. That one is fully structured and built out on my website. So there are blog posts that talk about this subject. There are cheat sheets that you can download. There's videos that you can watch. So I'm going to really fly through this, and I apologize for that, but all of the resources you need, if it helps you, you can go get off of the website. The other one is fundamentally flow, and that talks about different topics that may be new to admins. Things like, what's a variable? How do you deal with loops? I know a lot of people are confused about loops, and we're going to talk through that today as well. So let's take a look at our first similarity. Both Process Builder and Flow have a new button, and I know you might be thinking, seriously, Terry, I came in here and I'm standing in the back room because they both have a new button, that's the best you got? Well, light bulb number one, they both have a new button. One thing that you will find with Flow is Flow will almost always take things to the next level. And it does that also with the new button. And so when you click the new button in Flow, it's first going to ask you what type of flow do you want to create. And we're focused on moving from Process Builder to Flow here. So in that kind of a scenario, you are going to choose a record-triggered flow. So here's what I want you to remember. If the automation that you're needing to build is something that you would traditionally go to Process Builder to do, then in Flow, you're just going to choose a record trigger flow. Also, if you're brand new to Flow, I recommend that you start by learning record trigger flows. Record trigger flows are your easiest entry point, in my opinion. And everything that you learn in your record trigger flows will be transferable to all of the other types of flows. Okay? Let's take a look at our next object. In Process Builder, you're going to see those on the left side of the screen. You're going to see Flow on the right side of the screen. I know in the back that's probably going to be impossible to see. It's almost impossible up here. The arrows are showing you where your similarities are at. In Process Builder, the first thing that we would do if we had an object, we need to define that object. So the blue box in Process Builder is that object. We need to click on that, and we are asked to choose the object and when we want to create the record. That same process happens here in Flow. We have to choose our object, and we have a couple more options on when that flow will run. Now, if you scroll down the screen a little bit further, you will find this nice new feature in Flow that is, well, it's not new to Flow, but it's new if you're comparing the two. And it's entry criteria. I love entry criteria. Entry criteria allows me to bypass this flow entirely if that condition that I am putting in there is not true. So that's very nice. And Process Builder ran when you hit that save button. Now you have the option of telling it whether or not you want it to run or not. Now we get down here to the two big buttons at the bottom. And this is also new, and it can be a little bit confusing if you are new to the concept of what's called order of execution. I think Salesforce did a fantastic job of describing for us fast field updates. They give you a nice definition right there on the button. Fast field updates are really nice because they run before the record actually is saved to the database. That makes it fast. That's why they call it fast field update. I don't think they did as good a job explaining actions and related records. So let me give it a try. If you are updating a field on the object that triggered the flow, you are going to use a fast field update almost all the time. If you are doing anything else, anything, it doesn't matter, anything else, it's going to be under the actions and related records. Okay, let me say it one more time. If you're updating a field on the object that triggered the flow, you're going to almost always use a fast field update. Anything else is going to be the actions and related record. So let's start with a little quiz. Your choices are going to be fast field update or actions and related records. Are you ready? If you're updating a field on the record that triggered the flow, are you going to choose a fast field update or a actions and related records? 100% right. That's awesome. If you want to create a new task, fast field update or actions and related records? Are you sure you guys haven't done flow already? This is pretty good. What if, let's try this one. What if you wanted to update a field on the object that triggered your flow? All right, good. What if you wanted to create a, let's say, a chatter post? All right, what if, this one's tricky, what if you wanted to update a field on the object that triggered the flow? Fast field updates, thank you. I wasn't sure if you were going to be with me on that one or not, that was hard. What if you wanted to send an email? Actions and related records, very good. I won't try it one more time, I think you kind of get the message. So. All right.
So what's the exception? When don't you?
The exception for when you don't use the fast field update to update a field on the object that triggered the flow is if you need that field's value in the after or in the actions and related records. So, because if you update and change a field on the fast field updates, it's not going to be changed in the after side. So, if you have to, that's the exception. I can walk you through it later. Yeah. Okay, so we're ready now. The next thing that you would do in Process Builder would be to define the decision blocks. That's the blue triangles, the true and the false. Flow uses the same concept. They call it a decision. They change the color to orange, so it's no longer blue, it's orange. And it allows us to have multiple true paths, so multiple options for outcomes where flow was always true false. Both of them require a label. Both of them require conditions. If I wanted to have additional conditions, I simply click the little plus sign next to the number 4 up there, and I can have multiple options for different outputs. And we're going to see that in the demo here in a little bit. If I want to update a record, Record trigger flow, it would be a fast field update. Thank you. Both require a label. Both require you to identify how you're going to find the record. They have a filter criteria, and then you have your field and value sets at the bottom. Both, it's exact same things, just different names, different places on the screen. If you want to create a record, also you have a label. You have to tell it you have to define your field and value sets. Here's where I want to stop though for just a minute, because we have a question here at number 2. How many records do you want to create? Process Builder only allowed us to create a single record at a time, right? You'd only create one record. So if we're matching what you can do in Process Builder, we're simply going to choose number 1. How many records to create? We're going to create 1. We're not going to get into how to create multiple records yet here today. Email alerts. Email alerts are a little bit tricky. They hid this one in Flow from you. All of the other ones we've talked about has their own element that you can simply drag onto the Flow canvas. Email alerts, they didn't. They're hidden. And here's the secret. If you can't find what you're looking for, look underneath the action element. I love the action element because there's a nice search bar right at the top of the screen, and you can just start typing something in it, like email or send, and all of your email alerts are going to show up. And those include the old email alerts that were done like with workflow rule type email alerts. They're all there. And then the last one I want to look at real quick is one that I really am not a fan of. It's approval processes. I keep waiting for Salesforce to redo approval processes. Anybody else feel that way? I think that they should just be a template that you can drag onto your Flow canvas, or maybe it's just an element, I don't know. But it can certainly be simpler, I think. But these work just like your emails. It's sending emails, you go into the action, you're going to simply type in approval, and all your approval processes will show up. There is one difference, and that one difference is this concept called record ID. Record ID allows us to relate the email alert and the approval processes to the record that you are trying to trigger it from. So here's what I want you to remember about record ID. When you click into that field, you're going to see an option that's called $record. $record is your friend. So say that with me. $record is my friend. $record is your friend because $record represents the record that triggered your flow. Okay? Represents the record that triggered your flow. $record is your friend. So you're going to click into that $record and you're going to see all of the fields that are a part of whatever that object is. You're going to scroll down to the ID field, select that, and that's going to be your record ID that you type in here. Okay? There are a lot of other options there. If you want to play around with those when you get a chance, that's totally fine. But for now,
Gary,
that's what you need. Yes?
for record trigger flow, are you allowed to use a different ID? Or is it pretty much needs to always be this record ID?
I think you can use a different one if you have it there. I would suspect.
It just has to live on this object.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If I am wrong, somebody tell me. Yes?
Send the record that's being created in Flow into an approval process.
Send a record that created. Say that one more time.
Created in the Flow into an approval process.
Once you've created that record, you'll get an ID for whatever the record variable is that you defined, and you can throw that ID in that field. You do have to get the record created first. All right. Again, I know that was really fast and it's really hard to see the screen. So jump out to Terry's Tidbits and you can find all of that information in full detail out there. If you find that technique a little bit helpful for you. I like the idea of being able to compare what I already know to what's new, and it just kind of makes it click a little bit easier for me. So hopefully that turned on at least a few light bulbs for you. I want to ask you a question. How many of you have a dresser? Yeah. Almost 100%. Some of you don't. All right. You live out of a suitcase. It's all right. Nothing wrong with that. No judgment. How many of you in your dresser, you have drawers in your dresser? Yeah. Yeah. You may not know this about me, but I really like things to be organized. I hate chaos. It drives me insane. Like you, I also have a dresser in my bedroom, and it has drawers in it. And one of my drawers is a socks drawer. I have these lovely Trailhead socks that was given to me. I've never worn them. They live inside my socks drawer. Anytime I need socks, I just simply go to that drawer. I pull them out because that's where I stored them. I also have a pants drawer. Pants go in the pants drawer. I know it's shocking. Shirts go in the shirts drawer, pants go in the pants drawer, socks go in the socks drawer. Variables are simply drawers. Variables is a concept that can be new to a lot of admins. It is nothing more than a drawer. It is a place to store something temporarily. And anytime that you need that, you simply go to the drawer, the variable, and it is there for you to retrieve. Variables are simply drawers. Let me introduce to you our use case. Today we're going to build out a flow, and this is going to be a screen flow, and we're going to have to do this fast, but our use case is simply that our HR department has come to us and they asked us to create a screen that shows them the number of open positions and the number of filled positions. We have a position object that has a status field on it, and those options are in that pick list. Okay? So we're just building a screen. It's going to show those two values. I know those of you who are good with reports, you're probably thinking, well, why not just use a dashboard, Terry? Well, it's because we're trying to learn flow, okay? All right, so we've got a screen flow here that we're going to create, and I'm simply going to go over to the resources, and I'm going to select variable. The first variable I'm going to create is going to be a number, so I'm going to start it off with NBR, open positions. Data types is something that you have to define with a variable. Socks go in the socks drawer, pants go in the pants drawer. Nothing else goes in those. It's the same concept here with your data type. This is a number that we need to calculate, so I'm going to choose number. And if I were to create a variable that was a text variable, I could do that, but then only alphanumeric items can go into that field. The one that is my favorite is the one that's called record, because then I can store an entire record with all of its fields in that variable, and I can reference them wherever I need to. That one's super awesome. But we're going to do number. We're also going to say it doesn't need to have decimals, and we're going to give it a default value of 0. Okay, so that's our first variable. We're going to create the second one, and that second one is going to be our filled positions. And if I misspell something, sorry. All right, so why are variables important to us? I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. Variables are important to us because they allow us to store something in them temporarily, and then we can go back and reference them anytime we need. Okay, variables are simply a temporary storage or holding place for a value. All right, next, now if we need to build a screen that shows the number of open positions and the number of filled positions, we need to next get some data, right? So we need to query some data. And you might be thinking, whoa, whoa, whoa there, dear Terry. You said query data, and I'm not a developer. Did you forget? I'm not a developer. Well, let me ask you this: how many of you are able to create a list view in Salesforce? Are you able to create a list view? Salesforce has made getting data from the get element as simple as defining what you would normally do in a list view. So let's do that. Let's scroll down here and we're going to do a get. And we're going to choose our object, that is positions. All right, so this is the part that's kind of like the list view. So you just simply define the conditions for what you want to see. And in this case, I'm going to click on the fields, and you'll see all of our fields will show up on that object, including the status. And I need open, and I need status equals filled. And this needs to be an or, so I'm simply going to change it to an or. Now, I am going to scroll down the screen here a little bit, and you see the option there of, do you want one record or do you want all records? And this one, it can sometimes be a little bit confusing, so I want to explain this one to you a little bit differently. And before I start that, I want to have another confession. So this is like Terry's therapy session, if you're not aware. Terry grew up in a very strict Christian home. And it was so strict, you might ask, that playing cards was not allowed in our house. Anybody else grow up in that kind of situation? You're familiar with that? We could play with rook cards. Anybody familiar with rook cards? We could play with those, but not playing cards. Playing cards led to gambling, and gambling was bad. So we couldn't have playing cards. I don't believe that to be true, and so lucky for you, I did bring my set of playing cards. And you hopefully will be able to see this up there. If I have a card here, and I'm going to say that this card represents a record in Salesforce. Okay, so I have a spade 4 heart of record. I might have a 3 of clubs, and I've got an 8 of diamonds there. Those are individual records. In my get statement, if I want just one record, I just select that option for one record. Okay? If I need to choose multiple records, then that might be something like my deck of cards here. This is called a collection. Record, collection. Multiple cards is a collection. Multiple records is a collection. So that's another new term that you'll want to be familiar with if you're not. It just simply means more than one. Now, I can define a single card as a collection. That just means I can add more cards to it. But generally speaking, it's one. Okay, so let's go back to our get here. In our scenario, we want to get all records. And then we get to the last item on the screen, and you might have trouble seeing that. It says, I've got 3 options: automatically store all fields, choose fields and let Salesforce do the rest, and choose fields and assign variables. If you're new, just go with the default. Let Salesforce do all the hard work. Once you get to where you feel like you're ready to conquer the world, you can go into the other ones. The other ones are very powerful. They're very good. I recommend them. But if you're new, don't worry about them yet, okay? Just go with that default selection. We'll let Salesforce do its job. All right, so that's our get statement. How many of you are familiar with the game Slapjack? All right. This is not a magic show, by the way. All right, so in Slapjack, your cards are dispersed, and I'm cheating. This is not how you would deal cards, but we have 4 players in our Slapjack game. And the way that Slapjack works is the players will turn over a card, and if that card is a jack, the first person that slaps that card down wins that pile. The thing about with Slapjack that's really important to understand is that the only card that matters is the one that's face up. It's the one that's right here in the middle of our process. And we're going to continue to go around that until we get to a jack.
And hopefully it happens soon because we have a time crunch. And the thing that is important, when that new card comes down, that's replaces the other card that was important, and it's the one that's now important. I don't know where we are. There's my jack. Okay, so slap that. That gives me all of those cards. The card that's visible is the one that matters. We're going to create a loop. And when I put this loop on the screen, you're going to see that it's going to create for us a circle. And we're simply going to define it as looping through positions. I need to tell it the collection. There's that get positions that we just did. And I'm going to click done. I get this nice little circle. When I come through that circle, anything that is inside that loop, whatever the record is that we're working with is the only record that matters. That record is called current item in loop. Salesforce creates that for us automatically. If you are confused, if loops are confusing to you, remember Slapjack. The only card that matters, the only record that matters is the one that is face up. It is called current item in loop. Okay? So we've got 15 minutes left. All right, so let's do our next step, which is going to be to put a decision on our loop.
What did you call that?
Current item in loop. All right, so we're in the loop. We don't need that. And we need to evaluate the record to determine if the status field is a filled position or if it's an open position. So we're simply going to have a decision that determines which one is this so that we know how to increment our count. So I'm going to throw a decision element on here. Decision, we'll call it status. My first outcome, you can kind of think of this one as your true path if you're used to Process Builder. And I'm going to not call it true, I'm going to call it open. And open is defined as current item in loop. And if I scroll down, there's my status field equals open. If I want to add another outcome option, like filled, I'm going to click the plus sign. We'll call it filled. Current item in loop. Status equals filled. When this decision is evaluated, it's going to start at the top of that outcome. So it's first going to check, is this an open status? If it's not true, it's going to drop to the next one, and it's going to say, okay, is it filled? If it's not either one of those, it's going to go down this default outcome. You can think of this as your false path. I just simply like to call it skip. We're not going to do anything. There are times where you might do something in that position. In our use case, we don't need to. In fact, we should never go down that because our query said only open and filled positions. And for the sake of time, we're going to actually look at the next one already pre-built. So what I'm adding next to my flow, inside this, I've got a open position and it's got an assignment in it. An assignment allows you to define a value. So you assign something you assign a value to something. If I look at the open one, I'm using my variable that we created earlier, open count, and I'm simply adding 1 to it. I'm doing the same thing on the filled. Filled count, add 1. That's going to increment each of my cards. So as my card goes through that loop, it's going to increment each one of those variables that we established. It's going to add 1 to it. So the second card that goes through, it adds another 1 to it. Okay. Now I finish that, I come down and I'm going to loop back up to the top of that. And when I get to that loop element at the top, I'm discarding my current card. I'm placing the new card face up. That new card becomes current item in loop. replaces the old one. And now that card is going to process through my loop. It's going to get discarded. The next card is going to come in and be face up and become current item in loop. Everybody with me? Does that make sense? Does that help you understand loops a little bit better? Okay, good. Now, the one last thing we have with loops that's important is when I'm done with all of my cards, I'm going to go down this after last items. Tell them we said hello. It's all good. Yeah. I'm going to go down my after last, and then I need to display my screen. So my screen is really simple in this use case. It is simply pulling a display onto, I think it's called a display field. What is it called? Display text. So I've got a display text here on my screen, and I've written in there simply some text that says open position count, and then I throw my variable on the screen, and when HR wants to see it, the counts, it would be there for them. Does that make sense? Now, one last concept I wanted to share with you, and that is you really don't have to do something like this in a loop. Salesforce has given us another way of counting values that are in a collection, and it's simply called a collection filter. Now, a collection filter, let's just kind of look at it this way. Let's say I've got my deck of cards. This is my collection. A collection filter is one of those things that is smart enough to look through my deck of cards, and it says, okay, give me all of your hearts. And so it's going to scan through that thing, and it's going to find all of my hearts, and it's going to create a new collection for me of my hearts. And so in our use case here, I've got a filtered collection that is saying, give me all of them that are in my collection that have a status of open. That creates for me a new collection that all I have to simply do is ask in my assignment, how many cards are in that collection? And it will give me that value for me. So a little bit easier than going through a loop using a filtered collection, okay?
Hey Terry, when you do that loop or the loop, does it go through every record in that object, or are you setting up at the beginning filter a different collection?
At the very beginning, we did a get statement,
Okay.
and that get statement filtered down to the records that we wanted, and that get created for us our collection.
Okay.
There's actually two ways you can create a collection. There might be more, but there's at least two.
Yeah.
One of the easiest one is to use a get. Go out and grab all the records that match. It's going to create a collection for you.
It's always just one object. You can't query
It is.
across multiple.
It is one object. Yes. Yep. It is always one object so far today. I hope maybe at some point we get a little bit more flexibility with that. At that point, you might as well be a developer if they give us that kind of flexibility, because then it's almost like you're writing query code. Now, there is ways of doing it. You'd have to use Apex right now to go out. So you'd have to get your developer engaged. They would write what's called an invocable method. You can pull that in. And in fact, there's a lot of times when I'm dealing with flows that are a little bit more complex, that's exactly what I do. There's a balance in my mind between when it makes sense to do some of your complex things inside a flow versus saying, hey, this is a developer thing. It's going to run a lot more efficient if we just pass it off to an invocable method. So you kind of need to balance that. I've walked into different clients and I've seen some flows and it's like, probably not a good way to do it. But we're all learning it. And so that's the good news is we're all going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've looked at stuff that I've done early on and I think, sorry, client. Can I redo that one for you? That's just a part of learning. So my philosophy is this: I would much rather you get in there and learn and make mistakes than not get in there at all. Okay, so get in there and play with it. Try new things. Don't be afraid to do something. Don't do it in production. Okay, you don't want to do that. Like most of us as admins, we kind of cowboy our way into production sometimes a little too often. Make sure you do it in a sandbox. Good question. Other questions?
So I've built a flow, and I've built a very complex flow.
Yes.
But I'm very worried. There's so many places to comment, and it's almost unrealistic. But I'm also like worried I'm gonna forget how I built it and what stuff means. So realistic, like how do you kind of leave a trail for future admins or yourself?
Yeah. I am a massive naming convention advocate. That is my soapbox. I have my naming convention. I've got a blog post written for naming conventions. You can find that out there. You saw how I did my naming conventions. If you are consistent with your naming conventions, you will be able to find things so much easier in your larger flows than if you just say, oh, I think I'll call this whatever. It creates a disaster for you.
That's what I'm worried about.
So adopt a naming convention. It doesn't have to be mine. I don't care what you use for a naming convention, just have one.
Right.
That would be my one suggestion, especially for complex flows. The other thing I would suggest is get comfortable with the idea of subflows. Subflows, and this is kind of a developer-like concept too. If we're writing code, we'll create what's called a method that does a certain thing for us. It just, it's kind of like a little black box. It does what it needs to do for us, and then it brings it back to kind of the main piece of code. Subflows are kind of like that. There's a lot about flows that are very developer-y-like, and which is some new concepts, and subflows is one of them. If it's something you can send off to something else and then get back your value, reuse it anytime you need it, then put it in a subflow. Yeah.
So I find often when I do a flow, and I could be doing this wrong because I'm new to it, but I'll name it get this object or something, and it'll tell me that name already exists. So you put a one after it or whatever.
Right.
Is it possible to reuse elements in different flows?
Not with the same name.
Is there like a for that?
Yeah, right. No, that you have to have a unique value
So I feel
name.
like I'm rebuilding the same concept of, maybe it's a subflow thing, but,
Yeah, think about maybe, can I do this as a subflow?
It's different for this flow than it is for, you know what I mean?
You could, it still might be a candidate for a subflow.
Yeah. And I find problems doing record trigger flows with subflows sometimes because it might be the start condition that's different or,
Well,
it just depends.
Yeah. It's going to depend on your use
It's
case.
not there yet, organized wise.
Yeah. One of the things that I coach people on is know what you're going to build before you get in there and build it. You can diagram it out. If you want. If you're that type of a personality, you'd rather go into Visio or go into Lucidchart and diagram out exactly how it's going to look. God bless you. I'm not quite at that level, but I will definitely go in with a game plan of what I'm going to build before I get started. Other questions? Good questions. Yes.
For it to be a subflow, does it have to be the auto launch, like no trigger one, or can it be any?
Does it have to be? That's a good question. Anybody know the answer to that? So her question was, does your subflow have to be a I forgot what it's called now, the auto launch flow. Thank you.
I don't think it can be auto launch.
No, it can be. That is the right way to do it. It has to be. It has to be. Thank you. All right, good. Thank you. I like having experts in the room. What was that? Yeah, I was going to say, I was thinking that you could too. All right, good. There was another question somewhere back here. Yes.
So I know that Salesforce wants you to push everything into flows, but
Yep.
certain things like workflow alerts are just so much more efficient and the whole, how do you balance that?
Yeah. Where I can use a fast field update, I will use a fast field update. It's going to be almost as fast as what a trigger would be. It's I was trying to remember on some of the research that they've done. It may be faster than even your old workflow rule if it's a fast field update. Not true if it's if you have to do it an after, but you've got to go. Again, this is me putting more of my architecture hat on. I would always look at the overall big picture. Does it make sense for this to even be in a flow? Is it complex enough that I should move it to code? So it's really more of an architectural decision in my mind. We are at our time, but I do want to give you one resource. Andy Yudkin, I can't say his middle name, and we host a Flow office hours. It follows kind of similar to the format of the MVP office hours. If you are working on a flow and you get stuck, you need some help, we meet the second Friday of every month at 2 Eastern. You're welcome to jump into those sessions. Go to flowofficehours.com and you can register for that. If you are a flow expert, please join the call, because there are times Andy and I aren't the only one that know the answer. There's so many different variations there, so feel free to join. We would love to have you if you're a flow expert. Thank you so much. I hope to see you. Feel free to connect with me anytime this week. Thank you so much.